You're listening to Be Happy. Be inspired by great interviews, great music, and news of inspirational events.
You're listening to Be Happy, Be Inspired. You know, we have Inspirational Book of the Week every week on Be Happy, Be Inspired, and it's a pleasure to be sat with Alison Waring, who's, well, got a book out called Breathe with Ease. How are you, Alison? All right?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm feeling very inspired.
Thank you.
With my breath.
With your breath, yeah. Thanks for talking to us today. Let's find out more about your book then. And let's, before we find out about the book, where did the idea for the book come from?
Well, I had an experience of an allergic asthma attack, and in that moment I was able to go from a full-blown asthma attack to nothing in 3 minutes using a breathing technique that I kind of stumbled across because I'd read about the Buteyko method, which was about slow nose breathing and diaphragm breathing, and it had said try and breathe without wheezing. I was like, if I could do that, I would be doing that already.
Yes, yeah.
So in that moment where I was wheezing away, and this had been one of many attacks that I'd had over the years, I decided to use a yogic breathing technique called Ujjayi breathing. And Ujjayi breathing is a slight constriction of the back of the throat, and you're breathing in and out through your nose from your belly, and you're making a kind of sound as though you're breathing on a mirror.
Okay.
And if you do that with your mouth closed, though, rather than open, it makes a kind of sound a little bit like Darth Vader breathing or dragon breathing. So I thought, well, it's not exactly breathing quietly, but I'm not wheezing as I'm doing this Ujjayi breathing. And the technique was to do a minute of the relaxed, quiet breathing and then a pause for as long as you could comfortably go. Well, you know, when you're wheezing away and your chest is constricted, it's very hard to pause at the end of your out-breath. So all I could manage was a couple of seconds. And so I did this Ujjayi breathing, which is known as victorious breath, and then a pause for 2 seconds. And then when my body wanted to take that next breath in, I did. And then I repeated that. And did another minute of Ujjayi breathing, and then a pause for a couple of seconds, and another minute of Ujjayi breathing and a pause. And in that third pause, my lungs opened up completely. It was like flicking a switch. So I went from full-blown asthma attack to nothing in 3 minutes. I thought, wow, this is something to share. And I'd been studying health and nutrition for 15 years at that stage. So it was really quite a revelation to me. I was so inspired. But it was actually more the out-breath, not the in-breath.
The breath, yeah.
That's the key, really.
Because let's be honest, it's not something we think about, is it, breathing, really?
No, it's a very automatic response. It's something that we do every day without thinking about it. And often when we do start thinking about it, we do sort of weird and wonderful things with our breathing. We kind of maybe breathe deeper or maybe put a lot of stress or tension on our breath, whereas when we're not thinking about it, we might be doing all sorts of other things as well. We might be breathing completely in a relaxed way, but often when we're stressed, the fight and flight mechanism actively increases our breathing rate. So most people that are suffering stress, and it doesn't have to be sort of steam coming out of your ear stress, it might be that you're just holding a bit more tension in your body, or your body might be stressed because you've eaten something that's not very pleasant, and your body's stressed because it's not digesting well. But there could be any number of reasons why your body's under stress, and that increases the breathing rate. And if you can actually learn to slow that down, and it's quite easy to retrain the breathing over a 4-week period, then you can start to have a new experience and start to manage your health better.
Right. So tell me about the book then. How is it structured?
Well, the book's in 5 parts, so it takes you on a journey understanding the mechanisms of your breathing in the first part. So that's all about your body and how to breathe effectively, and using nose breathing, diaphragm breathing, and slow breathing. So slowing the breathing down to take you into a more calm, peaceful state. In the second section, we look at the emotions and how our emotional state influences our breathing, and how we can influence our emotions through the breath.
Okay.
And then in part 3, we look at nutrition and the sort of nutrition that's helpful for improving your breathing, and also the things that make your breathing worse, so the foods that could be more congesting and the foods that are more cleansing and that will optimise your breathing health. And because breathing is such a fundamental part of health, it's quite important to get these sort of basic building blocks in place and the foundations right. And then in the 4th section, we look at the mind and mindfulness and self-hypnosis, and how we can use the power of the mind to relax our body and our breathing. Because I think that's quite a key thing. You know, if we don't know how to relax, it's quite an important skill to master. And that really helped me in being able to master the Buteyko And the final part 5 section of the book is all about using what I call dynamic breath release, which is a modification of the Buteyko method. And that's where we use the breath to work with releasing emotions and emotional traumas from the past, and being mindful of how we're breathing, but also retraining your breathing over a 4-week period.
So are there exercises in the book to help you do that then?
There are, yes. Yeah. So it takes you through the whole process, and there's also a website that's attached to the book. I noticed
that, yes.
Yes, so you can go to breathewithease.co.uk, and there's a training program that will take you through that 4-week breathing retraining process. And there's also free resources that are associated with the book that take you through some of the guided meditations and the exercises that you can do to retrain it.
So I'm very conscious how I'm breathing as I'm talking to you, actually.
But isn't it interesting? Yeah. Do you feel like there's more tension in your breath as you're focusing on it?
Well, yeah, because I'm intensely listening to what you're saying, and so I've just noticed how my breathing is shallower as I'm, just focusing on what you're saying, really. So it's an interesting thing when you just stop for a moment and notice it. And you mentioned there, doing the mindfulness, and I think when you're doing that as well. And they talk about following the breath. And sometimes when you first start doing that kind of work, this is how I find it, I don't know if you find it as well, you're wanting to force it rather than just let it happen.
You're breathing your breath rather than the breath breathing itself.
Yes. Yeah.
There's a really fundamental difference that I've learnt over the years and studying breath work, and that's that you can actually watch your breath breathe itself with the intention of slowing it down rather than you breathing your breath. When you breathe your breath, there's a lot of effort that goes into sort of thinking about, right, I breathe, and maybe the tummy's rising and falling, or maybe you're breathing in the upper chest, which is the stress response to do that. So that fuels that fight and flight response. But to watch the breath and really have a focus on the out breath rather than the in breath, where we let go on the out breath. We let go of all the tension in the body as we breathe out. And then pause and wait for your body to want to take the next breath in. And in doing that, you're kind of watching the process, but you're kind of engaged with it. So you're consciously breathing. And that's the difference. There are so many different breathing techniques out there. You could do rebirthing, or the Wim Hof method, or the Buteyko method, or there's pranayama and yogic breathing, and many different forms of yogic breathing. But it's all about bringing conscious awareness to the breath and not putting tension into it, because we could spin ourselves into an anxiety attack just by focusing too much on the breathing and putting too much stress into that process. Yeah,
no, I can go with that. Been there. I think I've been there.
Been there.
And I just as you're talking there, I was just thinking about as well, when if you've got a job where you sat driving a lot as well, I mean, you could probably in a cramped position as well. That could affect your breathing, I guess, as well.
Very much so. In fact, most people that have a desk job tend to be hyperventilating, and what hyperventilating means is breathing faster or a greater volume breath than needs be for the purposes of what you're doing at the time. But quite often we'll be slumped at our desk, we won't be breathing using our diaphragm, we won't be breathing into our abdomen, we'll be using the upper chest muscles. Now, if we're breathing about 20,000 breaths a day, and we're doing that all up into our neck and shoulders, we're going to create an incredible amount of neck and shoulder tension, which could lead to tension headaches and all sorts of other symptoms, sore throats, because you haven't got the drainage there. Whereas if you're using the diaphragm, which is where we're meant to breathe, you'll be massaging your internal organs, you'll be massaging your stomach and your intestines and liver, which are just underneath the diaphragm, so it creates an active pumping action on drawing the blood back to the heart more effectively, so your blood circulation's improved. So there's so many health benefits. It's not just about overcoming asthma. I think that's the thing that I want to get across. I've looked at so many different aspects of health over the years, and it really boils down to very simple things. Just those parts in the book, although they helped me overcome that asthma attack, and I've sort of put them together in that way so that other people could understand how they can take control of their health. It can be applied to many different aspects of health improvement.
So it's a bit about doing these things so it's like making it a regular basis, really, isn't it? Making it consistent in your life.
Yes, and to have a daily practice where you're able to do some breath work, and even if it's only for 1 or 2 minutes, if your phone beeps, maybe just bring your awareness to your breath. And actually it's been shown in one study that when we have a beep on the phone, or because we've got so much interaction with technology going on, that we can actually be in a state of hyperventilation or mouth breathing, and there might be the gasp of I've got another thing to do, and that will put us into a stress response. So being mindful of how we interact with things, and nose breathing is quite fundamental to the whole breathing process.
And taking time out for that, I'm just, as you're talking there, I've just been reflecting on some of the things that I do. One guy said to me once, how do you just keep doing the things you do? And I went, well, literally every afternoon for 15 minutes, I actually take time out and do a mindfulness practice. And I'm sat in a lay-by doing it or whatever. Yeah. And it just helps. And then you come back and you feel refreshed and you're able to carry on. Instead of just ploughing on thinking, I've got to do the next thing, I've got to do the next thing. So some great things. Tell me a little bit more about the nutrition then, because that's interesting.
It is. So there's foods that are more congesting to our body. So wheat and dairy and sugar, they all tend to be more mucus forming and congesting on the system. And processed foods, junk foods, we're kind of all aware of the fact that they're not great for us. So the more of those foods that we eat, the more we tend to bring our body into a more acidic state. And things like tea and coffee and alcohol, they're all acid forming in our system. And our breath is used to regulate our body, and we have to keep our blood in a very neutral pH for all of our cellular functions to work properly. And so if we're eating a diet that's very acid forming, like lots of meat and lots of alcohol and sugar and wheat and stodgy foods, then breathing is one of the ways that we expel some of that acid waste, because we're breathing out carbon dioxide, and that's carbonic acid. So if we have a more alkalizing diet and a more neutralized diet in terms of foods that are high water content but lots of minerals, lots of nutrients, that helps to keep our pH in a more neutral range and enable our body to function better. And so I have a very high plant-based diet, and make sure that I also get the sort of protein from more plant-based foods rather than the more acid-forming foods. And it really stands me in good stead. I mean, I've been having a green smoothie every day with kale and maybe a pear and some flaxseed in it. And I've watched all the people around, and I kept things quite clean over Christmas. I had a bit of indulgence, but we decided to have a couple of days of just water-only fasting, just to give our bodies that detox after we'd had the indulgence, and just had a couple of rest days. And pretty much everybody in the workplace, in the York Natural Health where I work, they were kind of one by one, they were getting flu and sick. And I've managed to not get any of that just by simple relaxation. We've been doing a bit of yoga every morning and some breathing practice, and keeping a healthy balance with the nutrition as well.
God, this sounds a fascinating book, full of information there and knowledge and things. I'll just ask you a question for the listener. How do they test their acidic level?
You can't. There isn't a test for that. So I think if you're starting to feel joint aches and pains,
a bit arthritic maybe.
Yeah, or if you're getting symptoms of dis-ease, not that it's. If it's a true pathology, you're more likely to be in an acidic state. But there isn't a specific test, because it's more a sort of functional term that we use to say, well, whether the body's in balance or not. The blood always has to stay in the sort of pH range of about 7.3, 7.4. So if your blood does go to acid or to alkaline, that can be measured, but that's pretty much near the end of your life. Really.
You're in trouble.
You'd be something like in metabolic acidosis. So the blood doesn't change its pH, but in order to keep that in the healthy range, your body has to dump into the tissues. Now, if you've had a run and you haven't breathed enough and you've got a stitch,
yes,
that's lactic acid.
Yes. So
that acid in the tissues causes them to ache. And so when we're feeling aches and pains in our body, that's a sign that your body's dumped a lot of acid waste just from the byproduct of living. Because if you don't have enough oxygen in your body, you'll produce energy from carbon dioxide, which is the waste product of your cellular activity. And when you produce energy from carbon dioxide, you always produce lactic acid. And so that's the byproduct.
Right, okay.
And we're producing that all the time. So if we can support that with the healthy nutrition that's more mineral based, that the minerals will help to neutralise that acidity, we're giving the body a helping hand.
Giving it a good chance.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we don't half abuse our bodies,
we
really,
do.
don't we?
I know, and I'm guilty of it too. But, it's
you
being
know.
mindful of then bringing yourself back to a more balanced state and consistently doing healthy things. But if you had like an 80-20 rule, it depends on how unwell you are. If you're really unwell, living an 80-20 principle, which would be 80% of the time doing everything right, 20% having a little indulgence, that would actually be the wrong thing to do, because if you're in chronic health, you really need to stoke the fire and give the right fuel. You don't want to be putting damp wood onto a fire that's kind of dying out. You want to kind of stoke it with really good fuel that's dry, and in Chinese medicine, damp food would be the sort of dairy and the wheat and yeast and sugar. They're all mucus forming foods, and they're not great if you're struggling to breathe anyway.
Yeah.
And so I kind of keep those out of the diet, and keep those really healthy, nutritious foods in, and lots of salads. I have a salad every day, and I have a smoothie or some fruit for breakfast. So it's kind of having at least 2 raw food meals a day is really useful. But I go into that in more detail
In the book,
yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for hours.
Oh,
I could talk to you for hours.
I could talk about it for hours. That's why I had to write it down.
So look, if people want to find out more about the book, find out more about you, how can they get in touch?
So they can get in touch through the website, breathewithease.co.uk, and they can find out more information about the training through reading the book, and also from the free resources that are there that you can access once you've bought the book. And also there's the training programs that will take you through the full 4-week retraining program. I've actually had a breathing video designed that paces your breathing at a nice slow 6 breaths per minute rate, because that's what they found is the optimal rate for calming your nervous system and bringing that fight and flight state down. Because when people take a medication, it's, like if you have an asthma attack, they give you an adrenal stimulant, so it's something that the cortisol that people inhale is just something that the body would naturally make. But if it's become exhausted from breathing too much and pushing too much all the time, it gets to that exhausted state where you get the wheeze or you get the headache, and then they take the stimulant to stimulate the body back into that stress response. And it's kind of just making sure that you're not pushing yourself to the limit all the time, and bringing it back to what's within a comfortable range. And if you're working on stimulants, you're never going to know where your limit is. Yeah. It's almost like you're taking an overdraft out all the time, and it's actually time to put something back in.
Okay. So the book available on Amazon?
It is, yes.
Okay, so you can find
the website, but Amazon equally, yes.
Yeah, great stuff again. So give us that website again.
So it's Breathe with Ease, with an E. So breathe with an E on the end.
Yeah,
with ease.co.uk.
Brilliant. Alison, thanks for talking to us today.
It's a pleasure.
And being this week's Inspirational Book of the Week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Be Happy, Be Inspired is a weekly podcast. For more information about Steve Twynham and how to join the growing number of listeners, visit stevetwynham.com. Be Happy, Be Inspired is produced and presented by Steve Twynham. Copyright applies.